Hey, East High Health students. Hope you are all doing well. Mr. Eckert here for another virtual lesson. Couple things about this week's lesson. First of all, pretty heavy topic, and by heavy I mean serious. And I don't want to bring the mood down or anything, but this is one of those things that we talk about in health class, and it's a difficult situation, and it is much easier to do it when we're in person with you, and that's suicide. And normally, having that connection with you in class is beneficial, because I know that, and Miss Lair and I were talking about it, this is a tough subject for a lot of people. And I want you to understand that even though we can't be with you in person right now, if this is a tough subject for you, do not hesitate. Reach out to myself, Miss Flaherty, your counselors for any support you might need, especially during this time, because this is a time which, we're all kind of isolated, and you sort of can get in your own thoughts and feelings, and this isn't easy for anyone. But it's especially not easy for individuals that have a brain that's still in development. Once you hit the age of 24, 25, your brain is fully matured, and you're more in tune with your own feelings, and you can deal with those feelings much easier. And we're going to explain that a little bit in the lesson. So I just want to throw that disclaimer out here. The other thing is that because this topic is very important, we're required to talk about this in our New York State Health curriculum. This is going to be like a two-part lesson. And I'm going to give you kind of like an appropriate time that if you want to break it up into two different, settings, that I think there's a good spot in the lesson where you can hit the pause button and then finish it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video myself and give you guys a break, and then come back and finish it later. So I will point that out as we get into this. So want to start out the lesson with a little bit of a song, and to put this kind of into context. And if you click on the link, it's this song right here by a band called Simple Plan. And to put this into context a little bit, this song came out in the year 2004, which I'm pretty sure it's 2004. 2004, yep. So this song came out in 2004, and I was just out of high school, and this was a pretty big song when I was in college. Would have been my second year of college. And humor us. We know it's not a lot of people's style of music, but it's not always the music. And we've shared things in the past before where it's about the lyrics, right? It's about what the people are saying, what they're talking about, and sort of dive deeper into something, even though it's not your style, right? So I'm not going to play the whole video, but this is kind of, and I want to bring up that word empathy. We talk about trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, because you yourself may not be struggling with, thoughts and feelings like this, especially as serious as, suicide, but other people might be. And it's always important to sort of be careful and have that empathy for people that struggle with this stuff, and understand it's pretty common to struggle with your feelings and thoughts, especially at your age. So when I was a kid, I really liked this song. So that's why the song's called Welcome to My Life. Because you're trying to put yourself in another person's shoes, but at the same time relate with them and their tough feelings. So that's only about half of it, but some really good context of what we're talking about is found in that. When you feel alone, think of now, betrayed, misunderstood, these thoughts and feelings just are all around us, especially at your age. And in high school, it's just the social aspect of high school is so big and so serious, but it's really where you grow and mature and sort of understand by the time you're done that there is life outside of this. And your high school life is just such a small part of it, but it's so difficult for people and it's so hard for them to get through it because of all the things happening. So our learning tracker for learning target for today, I can identify signs of suicide, advice on what to do, as well as a source for help. So you got to be able to recognize it and then be able to sort of help people out that may be struggling, or help yourself out if you yourself are struggling. And then identify some sources for help. And you notice right here, you're gonna be seeing a lot of this stuff. There's a National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. It's a website. There's, and I can show it later, there's another song about this. It's a little newer. And I know in 7th grade, if you had Mrs. Horn, she has a video, I think it's by Khalid. I don't know how you say his name, but he's got a song that has that deals with this kind of thing. And then who's the other rapper? I can't think of his name. I'll come back to it, but he's got the title of the song is the actual Suicide Prevention Hotline. His name has left my brain. But your do now for today is, how would you know that your friend was thinking about suicide? What would you do? Think about this. You may have a friend, you may have someone struggling with your thoughts. I know as a teacher, there are some warning signs that I've seen, a couple times, and, every teacher could probably attest to this. And understand that as a teacher, we are what's called a New York State mandated reporter. So if we hear we're concerned about you, and we worry that you may be hurting yourself or thinking about it, we have an obligation to report these things, but at the same time, keep it as confidential as possible. But that is something that you should know about all your teachers. We want you to confide in them, but understand if you do confide in them, that we have a duty to make sure that you're going to be safe and protected. So how would you know that your friend's thinking about suicide? What are some signs that you could think of off the top of your head? Maybe you know some, maybe you don't. But what would you personally do about it? Really think about that. 2 vocab words for today. The first one, ideation. So ideation is forming ideas and concepts, AKA you're thinking about doing something, right? That's ideation. And then the second is 2 words, but it's making amends with other people or situations. It's to correct a mistake that one has made, or a bad situation that one has caused, or maybe a bad decision that someone has made. When you make amends, you try and fix that. You try and make up for it. And that can be one of those signs of someone thinking about hurting themselves. So in this lesson, we're going to try and make some connections from the previous lessons. Obviously, Ms. Laird and I are always trying to do that. And there's a video I want to show you But before that, I want to go over some stats. So in our lecture here, we look at some numbers. Suicide was the 10th leading cause of death overall in the United States, claiming the lives of over 47,000 people. With all these things, you know, disease, cardiovascular disease, cancer, suicide, self-inflicted death it's in the top 10, which is kind of crazy to think about. If you haven't been exposed to it that much, or you haven't seen too much of it, you're lucky, because it's pretty prevalent, and it's like one of those ugly, sad facts about life. Suicide was the second leading cause of death among individuals between ages 10 and 34. Second leading cause of death in that age range. And there's a reason to that. And there were more than twice as many suicides in the United States as there were homicides. So there's more than 2 times the amount of people taking their own life than someone trying to kill someone else. And all we hear about usually in the news is this gun, death happened, or this, shooting occurred. You don't hear too much about the people that took their own life, or, attempted, right? Because we're talking about the people that actually carried out, not just to mention the people that have attempted, haven't succeeded. Because I couldn't imagine what that number must be. It's a problem for all teens, both male and female. And if you look at the numbers here, it doesn't matter if it's a female or a male. These rates are just proportionately even among the genders. And it's a problem for all ethnicities. Doesn't matter what race you are. This is something that is an issue. So I'm going to go back up to this video that I said I'd get to, and it's making a connection with that previous lesson about the brain and how it develops and what's going on, especially at this time of your life. So let's click on this. Well, I'm not going to click on it because it'll show me an ad. I already have it queued up right here. But the little background on this video, they're talking about, or in relation to, a case that happened very recently in the past few years. There was a young lady, her name was Michelle Carter. She had an ex-boyfriend. His name was Conrad, and she basically encouraged someone, her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, who had suicidal thoughts. She encouraged him to carry out the act via text message. Those messages were used against her in a court of law, and they, in my opinion, rightfully so, put her away in jail. I couldn't fathom finding out someone that I once cared about or do care about, and then finding out that they're struggling with their thoughts and emotions, and then helping that individual, fanning the flames, if you will, hurt themselves. It's a foreign concept to me, but I think it, not just for him being in the emotional state that he was at his young age, her at that young age, not understanding really how to deal with these things, and almost thinking maybe it's like a game to her. It's why this is so much of an issue and so much more prevalent in an age range rather than, a different demographic. So let's take a look at this video.
The most common set of illnesses during childhood and adolescence are psychiatric disorders or mental health disorders.
So mental health disorders in this age range, why? What's developing? The brain, right? Brains, when you're a younger individual, it's like a sponge. It's growing rapidly. It's able to easier retain knowledge. That's why it's important that you guys are learning and engaged in your learning right now, because your brain is at the peak of being able to learn new things. An older person like myself, or a lot of your teachers, we don't learn new things as easy as you do. Especially think of, toddlers, individuals learning a language, for the first time. Their brains are able to just rapidly process and get new things, and then replicate and repeat those things. And that's how they learn language, right? Think of how hard it is now for you as a teenager to try and learn a new language. It's much more difficult, a lot of studying being done. As an adult, it's even harder. So that brain development is just huge, and why there's so many psychological or mental health disorders at a younger age.
In fact, 17.1 million young people in the United States, 18 or younger, will be have a diagnosable mental health disorder. So clearly, adolescence is a risky time. And it also means that you're more likely to have depression or anxiety, and you're also more likely to be influenced by your peer group and what other people say.
So I'll be the first to admit, when you're younger, when you're in high school and things don't go your way, it's very easy to get sort of caught down a rabbit hole of doom and gloom thoughts. I can remember the being in high school, and if something doesn't go my way, just wanting to just be in my room and not really talk to anyone, and struggling with that. And you have to find an outlet to those things. And my outlet, back then, was sports and music, and I still love music to this day and listen to all different types of genres of music. I'm not like a one kind of genre guy, but you've got to find an outlet for these things, because it's very tough at that age to deal with negative things.
So that you might do something foolish that you wouldn't do if you were a child or if you were an adult. There's a real difference between the brains of teenagers or adolescents and that of children or adults.
This is a fact, scientifically studied. Your brains are different than someone who's fully developed, which is why they're so fragile, if you will, to all this stuff, and especially drug use.
But it's also a vulnerable time. You're more susceptible to impulsive behavior, and you feel everything so much more intensely, so that when you're hot, you're boiling. When you're cold, you're freezing. When you're distraught, you're completely overwhelmed with despair. And that's because your brain hasn't absolutely developed. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's in the front of your head, which does strategy, that tells you about cost-benefit ratio, that says, wait, let's think about the consequences. That prefrontal.
So that part of your brain that thinks about things, really plans ahead, that tells you to hit the pause button before you do something and regret it, that's not developed, which is why at your age, you make a lot more mistakes. And given in the situation that you're in an educational situation, that's why we give you more leeway in terms of your behavior. And when you get in the real world, if you make the same mistakes you make when you're younger and adolescent, you don't get as forgiving of an environment or a reaction, because everyone's an adult out there. We understand in education, teachers, your administrators, we understand what you're going through, the development that your brain's happening. So when you make a mistake, yeah, it's tough. You need to learn from that, but it's not the end of the world. And we usually allow those individuals to come back from that mistake, as long as it's not really bad, right?
The cortex doesn't start communicating to the rest of the brain until we're 25. And that
25 years old,
is the time when suicide actually starts to drop for that age population. I think we should be very clear that you can't convince someone who isn't suicidal to become suicidal. But when you're suicidal, we have plenty of evidence that it is not a fixed feeling, that we know from people who have attempted suicide and survived that they wish they didn't do it. We have a lot of evidence by the fact that very often people attempt several times before they commit suicide, that there's a gray zone, and that having the right person, the right conversation, the right mental health professional, the right support from the people who love you can change the trajectory of that attempted suicide.
Boom. So think about individuals that you may have been, exposed to or known or been in contact with, people that are struggling with their thoughts. All these things are going on you really don't know about, but when you find out about it, your reaction could help save someone's life. Not you specifically, but just you knowing and then telling someone else and helping that person seek help. That act could then start a new chain of events in their life to save their life. And this is why this is so important. And to understand as well that if you're struggling with these things, it's so important to reach out and tell someone what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, how you're feeling it, that could be a step, almost like a fork in the road. You choose to try and get better from it, or if you don't seek help, you could go down a really dark place, right?
So while Michelle could not force Conrad to kill himself.
So this was Michelle and Conrad. That was the story that I told you about the girl who convinced via text for him to carry out his own suicide.
She could enhance his risk of killing himself because he was already on his way. And simultaneously, she could have screamed out for help. She could have called the police. She could have begged him to stop, which might have prevented this deadly outcome.
So really enlightening video and making that connection to, things that we've talked about just in previous lessons about that brain development and how much you can have an impact on not just yourself, but other individuals, people around you, people you care about, people you might not care about, but you just notice some things, right? The last thing let's talk about in this first part, and then you can hit the pause button or I can hit the pause button, is talking about, did you watch the series 13 Reasons Why or read the book? So obviously, several years ago, there was this big, almost controversial, it was controversial, series or show on Netflix that got released about, a young girl who killed herself, and she made, videos for the people that were the reasons why she was doing what she did. And I'm not going to spoil anything, which is why this is a good time to let you have your own time and then maybe take a break after this. But there's an article about the series 13 Reasons Why, and talking about it had an effect on suicide rates in teens. And I want you to read this article and then respond to it in this text box. So what are your thoughts about the ramifications of the series? What effects did the series have? And why do you think that was? Give us like 3 sentences here. All right. And then let's hit the pause button. Let's take a break, because I know this is heavy and this is probably really serious, but I want you to read that article on your own time. And you can pick this up later in the day and watch the second video that I post, or you can push forward and keep going if you want. It's up to you. So I'm going to pause it right here.